Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I'm so excited about today's guest because she is living the awesome life of a digital nomad entrepreneur doing awesome work that she's passionate about. And we're going to hear a lot about her story and how her field really gives her an overview of whether it's logistics, attention to detail, quality management. There's so much that she's incredible at. So let me tell you about today's guest. Her name is Cynthia Davis. She's a woman and veteran-owned business owner who started working with different management systems in the Air Force for 11 years and then transitioned to manufacturing in aerospace and defense for 5 years and then transitioned to the natural gas utility industry before starting her company, Q3 Integrated Solutions, so that she could travel with her husband and still do what she loves for her career. So she is coming at us today from her home in Nicaragua, which I think is so cool to hear about that. To tell you a little bit about her company, it provides organizations with assistance in developing or enhancing their quality management systems in different industries and pipeline safety management systems in the natural gas utility industry. Q3 Integrated Solutions provides services to also provide training on concepts within those key management systems, auditing or maturity level assessments to evaluate the effectiveness of programs that they may have in place. It sounds technical, but there's so many insights that Cynthia has from so many different aspects of these businesses, of these industries. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview today with Cynthia Davis. All right, Cynthia, I'm so excited that you're here. Welcome to the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Heck yeah. So obviously I read your bio a little bit, but I know that you've got an awesome backstory. Listeners love hearing it from our guests. Give us the quick version of your story. Who are you? How the heck did you get here?
Born and raised in Chicago, and after high school just wasn't ready for college or figuring out what I wanted to be as an adult yet. So I joined the Air Force, which provided me an opportunity to get many experiences and live all over the world, from South Korea to Tokyo, and just kind of travel with my family. My husband and I met in Tokyo. After that, I left the Air Force with some great experiences and had already fallen in love with kind of quality management, and made our way to Texas, where we were for 5 years before my husband actually went through cancer in 2014 and was medically retired from the Air Force. And so when he was retired, we moved to Arizona, and I got his opportunity to work with the natural gas utility industry, which was such a great experience for me, and getting introductions to other management systems. And I really loved the side of my job where I got to help companies enhance their programs. And so when it came time where my husband was like, hey, I want to be able to travel and we want to go live our best life and do things. And he's like, you've always wanted to, be able to open your own thing and really focus on helping companies with that positive side of building their programs. So I dove right in the deep end, and I started my company right at the beginning of this year.
Yes, I love that, Cynthia, especially because we can hear it in your voice, is that you did it with a smile. It sounds like you and your husband are both adventurous geographically, but also experience-wise. Thank you for your service, by the way. We love having veteran-owned business owners here on the show. And I think that whether we're talking geography, whether we're talking about industries that you've worked in, and obviously coming from the Air Force, you have such a diverse blend of experiences, which obviously lends itself to a diverse blend of perspectives. And landing yourself when it comes to quality management systems, I think it's fascinating to be having this conversation on the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast, because solopreneurs particularly may not always think about the term quality management, but whether we're paying attention to it or not, we're presenting our business in some way. What does quality management mean to you? And where do we even start talking about the important role that it plays in all different industries?
So quality is, again, yeah, you're exactly right. It branches into every industry. It's everywhere. And the best way that I look at it is quality is not a one-sided concept. It really approaches everything we do from different angles. And when you look at it, you've got, from your planning stages of any project you're going to do, even in project management world, all the way through your end product, whether that's a service that you're providing to somebody or whether it's an actual tangible product. Obviously, quality plays a key role, but if you don't have quality built in every step along the way, you're never going to have good quality at the end. So it's really about stepping back and figuring out, what do I want at the end, all the way from the planning phases to be able to know that you're actually getting what you are providing your customer, whether, again, that is a service or whether it's an actual product that you're selling.
Yeah, it's a great overview, especially because when I look at obviously the body of your work leading up to this, whether it's in manufacturing, aerospace, and defense, so many fascinating industries. And it's easy for us as entrepreneurs to point to those and say, well, of course they need to pay attention to quality. And I think back to an interview, a guest that we had earlier this year, Matt Eagle, who, when him and I talked about, where should we optimize for quality, for the customer experience, he used the example of cars. And he said, well, if we wanted to build a luxury car, think about the touch points, the steering wheel, the doors, the knobs on the stereo. Those are the things that we as consumers touch. But Cynthia, you've worked in a lot of different industries. What are those areas of quality management that you like paying attention to and that you feel like a lot of people overlook or they're particularly important to pay attention to?
So really, like I had said, it really starts in the planning phase. So, Q3 I decided on that name for my company specifically because of I look at the three key elements of quality management, which is quality assurance, quality control, and quality improvement. So it really starts at that quality assurance side where you need to build quality into your project plan, into where am I going to have quality checkpoints along the way. And exactly, the car industry has been known for quality for years. At the end of the day, though, a lot of people, what they don't realize is especially small businesses and people that are in service industries don't necessarily see the tie between quality to the end, but they don't realize they're already doing it. So as a service provider, when I take on a new client, obviously I go into a planning phase with them. What do you need out of this? Am I helping you write a program? Am I helping you do an improvement project to make a process you do better? And so I've got to start at that point to have a good understanding of what my product or my service needs to be to meet that customer's needs. And so a lot of people don't realize they're already applying all of these concepts of quality. And that's where I work with different companies to help them see what they're doing now and do quality improvement side of things to say, okay, now how do we go to the next level? How do we make it better so that the next time you do this service, you can do it faster? You can make it a little bit easier for yourself. Is that as simple as checklists? Is it an entire process overhaul? So that's where the quality improvement side becomes very important as well.
Yeah, Cynthia, I love hearing you talk about these things because as a business owner myself, as you start going into them and you're talking about checklists and, the KPIs that we're going to measure the success by, in my head, I'm like, oh gosh, Cynthia, you're pushing me. I'm going to have to sit down and reassess these things. And I think that's a lot of what our session today is going to force business owners into sitting down and doing, because a lot of us, we take these things for granted and we say, yeah, I want to put out a quality product or service, whatever your business may be. But yeah, it starts with actually measuring things. And that's why one of the things that in the research phase, you and I were communicating through our onboarding questionnaire, you wrote, and I love what you wrote here, standards can seem prescriptive and scary to some organizations, but they still need to meet them. Talk about those standards, because I think that hits the nail on the head for most businesses, is that we don't write those down. We know them and we say them. They're fluff words that a lot of marketers and salesmen will say, but we don't actually sit down with that intentionality. Talk to us about the standards that you like to set.
So standards, what I help an organization do. So for example, if a manufacturing is trying to reach a quality management system that would meet ISO 9001, what that is it's a very prescriptive standard, and it tells you certain things you have to have along the way. But in between those areas, there's a lot of gray area. And so you start reading these, and it can be very overwhelming, especially for smaller organizations or, very small businesses. And people tend to start reading the prescriptive language, and it becomes very overwhelming and it becomes very difficult. And that's where what I do with my clients is one of the first things I go through all the programs they have, and I help them see that they're much further along than they really think they are. They may not describe everything in what's the traditional terminology, but at the end of the day, I help them tie in where they're already meeting it. And you can almost visibly see them like take that deep breath and like, okay, this isn't as bad as I thought this was going to be. And then that's where I help with some of the gray areas to help them build these standards that are going to be work for their company, because programs like this are living, breathing documents, and they're going to constantly evolve and change. And so you need to also educate them and have them ready to go so that they feel comfortable. And it needs to fit into the culture of that business and that company, or it's never going to be adopted and it's never going to continue to work through.
Yeah, I think that last point that you made is really important for all of us business owners to think about. Is we're not talking about losing the culture and the feeling of your business, your brand, your product, your service, and heck, for sure not your employees and yourself as the founder. I think that's really important. Talk to us about some of those ways, because obviously you've worked on so many real world projects. What are some of those solutions that you've seen where you've said, look, this may work across this industry, but when it comes to what you guys are doing uniquely here, what are some of those unique solutions that you've seen that either you've implemented or that have worked in different industries or clients?
So one of the big things I always relate to with quality is employee buy-in. So if, as a business owner, if you just build this program and you just push it out there, there's resistance to change. It is human nature. Getting employee buy-in in the beginning parts of building these type of management systems is extremely vital to the success, because not only then are you early on educating your employees to the importance of this and the why factor of why do we need to do this, instead of, oh, well, to get this government contract, I have to do this. It really kind of gets them to understand that why, and then you bring them in and have them assist with portions of the project. And when you do that, it's those companies that I see that have a lot more success years down the line when you start to look at, who really adopted this, who took on this, versus the organizations that just kind of, shoved it down in throughout the system and said, okay, well, now we're going to meet this. But really getting that employee buy-in and making it part of that culture is really vital to the success of these types of programs within an organization, especially if you're newly introducing it.
Yeah, that's such a big point. And I feel like it's something that for a lot of listeners are obviously solopreneurs who are building up. Maybe they've got external freelancers. Maybe they're at the point where they're ready to hire. Maybe some of them only have a virtual assistant, for example. But all of these things, that team effort behind it, that team buy-in, that is such a critical component of any initiative that we push, whether it is management-wise, whether it's marketing-wise, whether it's internal processes. I love that perspective, Cynthia, and how important you stress that is. I want to ask you about the flip side, though, because obviously we're talking about quality, but the opposite of that is not so quality. Things don't always go the way that we want them to. How much of your work focuses on those times where there are failures and breakdowns in these systems, in these processes, in the things that we're delivering as business owners?
So one of the things that I do is I do help with trying to figure out the why. And so in the quality world, we're looking for root cause analysis. And so essentially you're going through different quality management tools to try and figure out what are those key breakdown points that led to this failure or led to the discrepancy that we want to go away and to never happen again. And then some of the vital parts of that is making sure that, you're not wearing blinders. And so when people are too close to a process, sometimes it's hard to take off the blinders to really dig down to find that root cause. A lot of people jump to conclusions and say, well, I know this, I've done it for 20 years, it's this problem. Well, if you knew it was that problem 20 years ago and you really fixed that root cause, then why do you know that's still the problem 20 years later? Why didn't we fix that then? So that's what I like to call Band-Aid solutions. Really doing the quality processes and finding out that true root cause, and then taking a step back and figuring out what is that corrective action that is going to stop this from happening and is going to also prevent this from reoccurring in the future. And so I work with organizations to, if they need it, to use those tools to be able to go down and find some of those and to be able to not only fix the process that they may have had the breakdown in, but we also look at similar processes to make sure that the same issue won't happen there, so that we can get true fixes in place and get away from those Band-Aid situations.
Yeah, if it sounds like a funny example, someone who says, I've been here for 20 years, I know what's going on, but yeah, you're right. How many of these things, we're all guilty of it in our own businesses as well, where it's like, yeah, this process sucks, but this is exactly how we do it. I've been doing it. And it's like, well, hey, let's invest some energy there, some intentionality and strategy to make it better. So I love that. When it comes to making it better, obviously something that's appealing to all business owners in any industry is obviously those success metrics. And you kind of teased to us one of them, which is, can we do this faster? Can we make this thing? Can we deliver this thing faster? Talk to us about some of the other success metrics or KPIs that, from your perspective, obviously such a process-oriented person, what are some of those KPIs that we can achieve when it comes to putting that strategy and intentionality behind it?
So obviously it varies a lot for KPIs and metrics depending on what your industry is and exactly what your product or your service is. Some of the ones that kind of span across many industries is obviously time. Look at the time of your processes. So if you've been doing something for 20 years and you know that it takes you 8 hours a day to do this, have you ever stopped and stepped back and looked at every step along the process? And do you have waste, what we call waste in your process? So is there something that's slowing you down that it's really not needed, so why don't we remove that? And now, what if you start saving 10, 15, 20 minutes out of those 8 hours? Well, as you continue to do this process, that adds up. So time is a very valuable KPI and metric. Obviously, as entrepreneurs, we talk about cost savings. So cost savings metrics are definitely huge. Know what your costs are for your processes, and then again, where can you look to apply improvements? And by having those KPIs, you're able to watch those changes over time to be able to see, are your changes you're making effective? Are you achieving the goal of the change that you wanted? And so those are just some that kind of span across everything. And then obviously, when those things don't go right moments. So you want to be able to track those to be able to kind of keep an eye on, what's going on. So I have a funny example that, years ago when I was in the aerospace and defense world, I was with a company and we were making a part. And it was a plastic part. And we dry all the raw materials ahead of time, and then it goes through the machines, and you're supposed to have this little widget that comes out at the end. Well, we turn around and it would not run right. And then these parts would sit in our storage and they would start to crack after only a couple of months of sitting there. And so we went through these huge improvement projects and we changed everything we possibly could, from materials to which machines were running it to, and we just baffled ourselves. So finally, one of the things we started tracking was when we were running it. And at the time, we were in the middle of Texas and it got very humid in the summer. We started seeing trends that when the humidity was over a certain point, that we could not run these parts because even running them, it would bring too much moisture in. And so it was quite interesting. So metrics can help with a ton of different ways to be able to look at an organization. And they're not just important for large businesses. They really can help with smaller companies as well.
Yeah, I love that real life example because the humidity, for example, maybe we don't all deal with humidity issues in our businesses, but I think that one thing that we can all relate to is putting fires out in our businesses. I am for sure not the only person on the planet that can say that the night before I make a to-do list. I always plot out what do I want to get done tomorrow, and all too often I don't get those things done. Why? Because I have to put out some fires, things that I didn't expect. And actually, yeah, Cynthia, you're making me realize I've never tracked what are those fires that are popping up in the past month. What are the things that took me away from my planned and my intended to-do list? So I really love that perspective. And hearing you talk about these things is fun because not only are you a subject matter expert, but I always remind listeners, you're one of us. You are a fellow entrepreneur. You're a business owner yourself. With that hat on, I'm curious, combining the subject matter expertise you have as a new entrepreneur, how has running your own business, growing your own business changed some of your perspectives? Or maybe it hasn't. Maybe you've realized, oh my gosh, these things that I do for clients, I need to incorporate that in my own business.
So very much every client, every process, I've been in quality management world for over 20 years, and I still have to remind myself sometimes, take off my blinders, step back, look at my own processes. I too have my to-do list. I run into the little fires I'm dealing with, things that just sometimes take you away from work, or if you're helping a company with a defect, you can't pre-plan when they're going to have an issue and need you to help them figure out their process, but now that's taking me away from something else. So I very much have to step back. I do monthly recaps of my own businesses, my own processes, and the time I'm spending doing different aspects because previously just the quality management side of things, that's what I love and what I've done for years. But now having to also wear the hat of doing my own marketing and my own accounting, and those are aspects that I've never had to do before. So I definitely have to step back and use some of my own quality tools and planning in my own processes and my company, because some of it's just, it's new. As an entrepreneur, you wear so many different hats. You obviously have what your key services that you're providing, and that's your subject matter expertise. But now all of a sudden, you've got to also throw yourself into all these other processes that you may not have had to deal with before. So for me, that's probably been my biggest learning curve over the last 6 months.
Yeah, listeners, are you hearing what Cynthia just shared with us? Super transparently, how often do I talk about my own little Sunday coffee dates with myself to reflect and have some intentionality? Cynthia just revealed to us that she does monthly recaps of her own business, which I love. It's almost as if I think that big businesses, they're lucky because they have a board they have to present to, be accountable to. And Cynthia, hearing that you're doing your monthly reports, even if it's just with yourself, that is a level of accountability and intentionality. So I'm so glad that you shared that with us. I love those insights. Listeners love when we get to talk entrepreneur to entrepreneur, not just subject matter expertise. And particularly with your business, I think it's awesome how working in all these different industries, like looking at the natural gas utility industry, for example, listeners are probably thinking to themselves, well, you have past experience in them, but what was it like diving in as a self-employed person, starting your own company in it? What was that transition like and getting your first clients? Talk to us about that and where your head was at and the execution of it.
So it was definitely challenging and interesting. So going from, my adult life working, from the military straight into all these other organizations, I definitely had the experience. But now the idea of going off on my own and not knowing, is this going to succeed? Is this going to fail? Am I sure that there's really a need out there that I can help fill this gap? And so when I first started with this, I definitely targeted more the natural gas utility industry. There's a standard that's been out for a couple of years, that pipeline safety management system. And it was kind of just introduced, and then all these companies are being recommended to follow this. And it's very similar to a quality management system. And so I was very familiar with it from my experience with the utility industry, but then starting to get my own clients was a little, it was interesting. So I actually had a friend who was had worked in another consulting type company. However, they can only handle like larger organizations. And so he's like, hey, there's a need out there for some of these smaller gas companies that need help. This is new to them. Some of them, it's just, they're wearing so many different hats, they really can't dive in and dedicate to building programs like this. And so that's where I actually got my first contract, was thanks to that friend, where they knew somebody in a small public gas utility that needed some assistance. And so I've been working with them now since I started. And then really a lot of the others is just been marketing and some word of mouth, because the utility industry is actually very close-knit industry, because if something goes wrong in one part of the country, the first thing that's going to happen is your own local government's going to come ask you, how are you going to make sure this doesn't happen here? And it could be catastrophic, and you don't want that. So making sure that they've got these systems in place that are, part of this pipeline safety is a vital part. And that's where I'm helping them bridge the gap, because like I said earlier, when you look at the prescriptive standards, it can become scary and overwhelming for some of these organizations. And some of them just don't even know where to start. And so depending on where they're at in their journey, that's where I love to, kind of help them and get them through it. So.
Yeah, Cynthia, I love so much about all that insight that you just shared with us, because there are a million ways to go about getting your first client, but I have heard from so many entrepreneurs a similar story to yours, where just leveraging your existing network, you never know what already exists within your network. And I think it's such a brilliant and natural fit for you, because you have experience in these things. So it's so cool to hear that. And also, you've listened to episodes in the past, so you know that I love to give guests the hardest part of every episode, and I'm going to give you a particularly hard one, Cynthia. We're going to raise the bar here today, because I love asking guests, with all these things that we talked about here today, obviously listeners are tuning in and saying, gosh, I've got so much work that I need to do. And the reason why I'm going to give you the harder job is because you have two jobs here. I want you, both from your subject matter expertise within quality management systems, what's your best piece of advice for those entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs as they're starting their businesses, as they're growing their businesses? From your subject matter expertise, what's something that you think they should do? And then the second part of it is, as an entrepreneur, you've built your business over the course of this year, and I'm so excited to track your progress looking forward. So you've got those unique insights, being a few steps ahead of them. What's your best advice from the entrepreneur's perspective as well?
All right, so you gave me some hard ones. All right, so the first one I would really say is make sure that every aspect of your business, when you're from your planning stages to whatever your end product is going to be and whatever processes go on between there, really take a look, step back. Don't just build it and be like, okay, this is my process, I'm good to go. You've got to be able to go back and look at it, and you want to identify those areas to make sure that quality is built in. Because as I mentioned earlier, if you don't have quality built into the right places in your processes, you're not going to get the right end product. And that could be as simple as doing your daily to-do list and making sure that all right, you step back, think about it. Did I get everything on here that I need to get done? Also, how does this play into the bigger picture? So how does my little to-do list, or like my monthly recaps that I do, how does that play into my end service, and what does that provide me value? If not, do I have this stuff in the right place? And those are some of the biggest things that I kind of recommend that you got to have from the quality side, that people don't even realize are quality concepts, but they build them in on a daily basis. It's normal to pre-plan a project. People are like, yeah, I've got a to-do list. And people don't realize that sometimes that stuff, it's a business checklist. It is a quality management tool. So that's where, being able to help organizations bridge the gap between what they do is so great. As the small entrepreneur side of things, it has been a whirlwind. For me, I've really, like I said, the biggest challenge for me was getting into some of those parts of a business that I did not have to deal with before. We had accounting departments, we had HR, we had, people that were doing all these other stuff, and now it's myself. So really having to apply my own processes to my company and my own business processes has been eye-opening, and reminding myself to step back, take that deep breath, and then let's reevaluate, why are we doing this and is it important?
Dang, Cynthia, I gave you a tough one and you knocked it out of the ballpark. I love both sides of the coin of the advice that you gave us, because it's something that we all need to do. And quite frankly, I'll tell you this, Cynthia, is that ahead of today's episode, obviously I never know where these episodes are going to take us, but leaving this episode here today, I hope that listeners feel the same way that I do, which is it's important and it's meaningful, and sometimes it can be kind of technicalities and technical work that we have to do to intentionally look at these processes, look at these systems, look at everything that we deliver for our businesses. But you for sure made it sound fun, and you made it sound like a big opportunity, because clearly you enjoy this stuff, and it's why you do it for a living. So I know that listeners are going to be eager to follow the work that you're doing, check out your business website. So the stage is yours. Tell us where listeners should go from here to follow you, check out your business, all that good stuff.
So we are on LinkedIn. So it is Q3 Integrated Solutions. And then I am also linked through my LinkedIn profile, Cynthia Davis. And from there, you can access our website and see our services. And, just having gone down this journey, even just reaching out and say hi, I'd love to talk to other entrepreneurs and see how they're just applying quality in their day-to-day processes. So please look me up, and that's the easiest way to find out the information about the businesses. And I would love for people to just reach out and say hi.
Yes, I love that, Cynthia. I love your attitude towards connecting with other business owners. So listeners, you all know the drill. Wherever it is that you're tuning in to today's episode, scroll right on down and you'll find those links. Cynthia's business website is at q3integratedsolutions.com. That's linked down below, as well as her personal LinkedIn, because I totally agree with you, Cynthia. Listeners, if you like this, you'll be shocked at how few people are either daring enough, brave enough, if they have the courage, or if they take the time to reach out to people who have given them a new perspective. So reach out to Cynthia on LinkedIn. You'll find that link down below, even if it's just to say hi and thank you for coming on the show, or even just to connect. You never know what these connections lead to. So Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of this stuff with us today on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.